The galaxy was burning. Stars still shined in the cold void, but the worlds that circled them were falling one by one. The proud civilizations that had ruled for thousands of years were powerless. Whole fleets that once carried banners of strength and glory now drifted in silence, their wrecks glowing like broken candles in the dark. The threat had a name whispered in trembling voices across the Union: the Herak Swarm. They were not a normal enemy. They did not march with honor. They did not speak, negotiate, or show mercy. They came like a tide of shadows, living warships with armor like bone, weapons that burned through planets, and hunger that never ended. No world was enough. No resistance was strong enough. When the Hereks came, nothing remained. The first to fall were the border colonies. The Union sent fleets to defend them, but those fleets never returned. Then the swarm pushed deeper, attacking whole empires. The proud Avked armadas, famous for their disciplined formations, were shredded in days. The shining crystal worlds of the Yilar were devoured in weeks. Refugees fled across the stars, carrying stories of fire and screams, of skies turned red, of children pulled into silence. The Galactic Union gathered in fear. Leaders from 100 species filled the Great Council Hall, their voices full of panic. Some shouted for retreat. Others demanded new weapons, new plans. But all of them knew the truth that none wished to say aloud. There was no weapon strong enough, no plan clever enough. The swarm was endless, unstoppable. It was the end of everything. For centuries, the Union had believed they were safe. They had believed in their fleets, their shields, their laws of peace. They had laughed at warlike species, calling them primitive and dangerous. But now the peaceful worlds were burning. Now the strong were broken. Now the stars themselves seemed to cry. And in that silence, one word was spoken: humans, the Deathworlders. The name rippled through the chamber like a storm. Some hissed, some shook their heads in fear. Others whispered as if saying the word might summon something dangerous. For centuries, humanity had been avoided, watched from a distance, treated as an unstable and violent people. They came from a cursed planet, a world of hurricanes, earthquakes, diseases, predators, poisons. A world where life fought every second just to survive. The Union had named such planets Deathworlds, and the humans had risen from the harshest of them all. To most of the galaxy, humans were monsters dressed as allies, too unpredictable, too emotional, too dangerous, but now, they were the only chance. A frail insectoid diplomat raised his trembling claws. If they agree to fight, perhaps we will have hope. A scaled general spat in anger. Hope? They are Deathworlders. They bring only destruction. Another voice, calm but sorrowful, replied. The swarm is destruction, and only destruction can face it. The council fell silent. Outside, refugees filled stations and cargo holds, waiting for safety that never came. Families huddled together, watching news feeds of burning worlds. Priests of 1,000 faiths prayed to 1,000 gods. But still the swarm came. The choice was clear. The Union would beg. For the first time in its history, the proud Galactic Union bent its pride and sent ambassadors to the small blue world called Earth. They carried no commands, no arrogance, only desperation. They went not as rulers but as beggars, and across the galaxy whispers spread. Entire species held their breath. Would the Deathworlders answer? Would the monsters of Earth unleash their strength? Or would they watch the galaxy burn? The Heraks did not wait for answers. Their fleets pressed onward, closer every day. Stars were swallowed, planets cracked open. The Union's defenses were breaking like thin glass. In the darkness of space, mothers whispered to their children, "Sleep. Maybe the humans will come." Soldiers prayed silently in their cockpits, wishing for a miracle. Refugees spoke in hushed voices of Earth, the wild world, the dangerous race. And in hidden corners of the Union, some wept, not from fear of the swarm, but from fear of what would happen if the Deathworlders truly joined the war. For what kind of galaxy would remain after the humans unleashed their fury? Yet despair left no choice. The galaxy was dying, and somewhere on the blue world, under a sky of clouds and storms, humanity was listening. The ships of the ambassadors entered Earth's orbit with heavy silence. Their hulls were scarred from long journeys, and their crews were tired from fear and sleepless nights. Each ambassador carried the same weight, the survival of their people. From above, Earth looked small compared to the great city worlds of the Union. It had oceans, clouds, storms rolling across blue and green land. To many alien eyes it looked peaceful, but those who knew whispered that this beauty was a mask, Beneath those skies, hurricanes tore cities apart. Volcanoes swallowed land, beasts with teeth like knives hunted the weak. It was a death world, and its children had grown in its fire. The ambassadors shivered as their ships descended. They were led into a vast chamber deep within Earth's capital. It was not grand like the shining palaces of the Union. It was simple, built of steel and stone, with flags of many nations hanging above. In the center stood humans, tall, scarred, eyes sharp like blades. Some wore dark suits. Others wore armor that carried the marks of old battles. The insectoid ambassador stepped forward first. His voice trembled as he spoke, his mandibles clicking. Great leaders of Earth. The swarm spreads. Our fleets are broken. Our children are dying. We come to you not with demands, but with pleas, help us. Lend us your strength or all is lost. The chamber grew quiet. One human general leaned forward, resting his fists on the table. His hair was gray, his uniform worn. He studied the aliens not with fear, but with something colder. Resolve. You ask for soldiers? He said slowly. His voice was heavy like thunder before a storm. Soldiers will not be enough. The insectoid blinked in confusion. Then what do you offer? The general's eyes hardened. Not soldiers, executioners. The words echoed through the chamber. The ambassadors froze. They had expected mercy or promises of unity. But what they saw in the humans' eyes was something terrifying. Rage sharpened into purpose. A reptilian envoy hissed in alarm. Executioners. You speak of slaughter. We seek defenders, not butchers. The general did not flinch. He pointed at a star map where red marks showed the swarm's advance. The Heracts do not negotiate. They do not retreat. They do not stop. If you want peace, you must burn their nests. You must break them so completely they will never rise again. A silence filled the air. Some of the ambassadors lowered their eyes, unwilling to meet the human's gaze. But others, those who had seen their own children carried away by the swarm, nodded with tears in their eyes. They understood. Mercy had no place against monsters. A younger human officer spoke then, his voice softer but no less firm. We have already fought them. They reached one of our colonies. Families were lost. We will not forget. The insectoid ambassador's antennae quivered. Then you will help us? The general's lips pressed into a thin line. He looked at his people, then at the frightened faces of the aliens. Finally he answered, We don't fight for the Union, we don't fight for your governments or your council. We fight because the swarm touched Earth. And that was their last mistake. The ambassadors felt a chill crawl down their spines. This was not the answer of politicians. This was the voice of a predator choosing its prey. The humans began to prepare. Factories on Earth lit up, pouring fire into the sky. Warships left their docks painted black and gray, their names carved in bold letters: Retribution, Iron Will, Unbroken Dawn. Soldiers trained not in simulation chambers but on fields of mud and blood, pushing their bodies beyond what most species thought possible. Alien envoys watched in awe and fear. To them, war was careful, strategic, full of rules. To humans, war was survival. And survival meant doing whatever was necessary. In secret meetings, some alien leaders whispered in fear. If the humans defeat the swarm, what will stop them from turning on us? Others shook their heads. Would you rather they stay silent and let the galaxy burn? As the human fleets rose into the stars, the choice no longer mattered. The Deathworlders had answered. The insectoid ambassador, standing on the viewing deck, watched Earth's ships leave the atmosphere in endless waves. His claws trembled, not from fear of the swarm, but from something new, he whispered to himself. The galaxy does not know what it is called upon. And somewhere deep in the black where the Herax swarm moved closer, a storm of steel and fire was coming. The galaxy did not wait long to see the Deathworlders in battle. The Herax swarm pushed forward as always, without fear and without pause. Their ships were like living mountains, wings of bone and flesh stretched wide across the void. Their weapons poured fire, tearing through asteroid fields and outposts alike. To most species, facing the swarm felt like standing before a tidal wave, hopeless, inevitable. But humanity was different. The first clash came near the border of the Union, around a dying red star. 100 alien worlds watched from hidden channels, their eyes fixed on the humans who had promised to stand against the monsters. The Union's surviving fleet formed a weak line of defense. Their captains prayed that the humans would not arrive too late. Already the Herrick's numbers filled every scanner. Their ships moved like a sea of blades. Then came the humans. Their warships did not glide with elegance. They did not form fragile circles or shining formations like other species. They came in hard. Brutal lines, engines burning so bright that even the Union captains stared in disbelief. Human ships roared forward like wolves leaping for prey. The first volley struck. Missiles screamed through the void. Not delicate plasma or crystal beams, but heavy iron and fire, each carrying enough force to split a mountain. The Herrick ships reeled under the impact. Explosions tore through their armor. Pieces of burning flesh drifted into the dark. And then the humans did the unthinkable. They rammed. Union officers gasped as they saw it. Human captains drove their ships straight into the swarm's vessels, sacrificing steel and crew to tear holes in the enemy lines. No other species would dare such madness. No other commander would order their soldiers to give their lives so violently. But the humans did it without hesitation, and the swarm, for the first time, faltered. Inside the ships, the fighting was worse. The Herracks swarmed through broken hulls, claws dripping with acid, jaws snapping with hunger. Alien soldiers usually broke under such terror. But not the humans. In narrow corridors, men and women stood with rifles, blades, even their bare fists. Their armor was scratched, their faces streaked with blood, but their eyes burned. They did not retreat. They did not beg. They fought hand to hand, screams of fury shaking the walls. A reptilian officer aboard a Union cruiser watched the live feed. He saw a human soldier, his arm torn and bleeding, grab a Herrax by the throat and drag it into an airlock before blasting it into space. He saw another, badly wounded, throw himself on top of an exploding bomb to save his squad. The officer whispered in awe. By the stars. They fight like they were born for this. Every alien watching felt the same mix of horror and amazement. For generations they had called humans reckless, dangerous, unstable, and here, in the fire of battle, they saw that it was true. But now they understood this was not weakness. It was power. The battle raged for hours. Where alien fleets would have broken, humans pushed harder. Where others would have retreated, they advanced. Their ships burned, their soldiers bled, but their voices over the comms were filled not with fear but with laughter, curses, and unshakable resolve. At last, the swarm began to pull back. The Herracks had never retreated before, but against the Deathworlders even they hesitated. Whole sections of their living fleet were in ruins. Their losses were heavy, and though humans had lost ships too, their lines still stood, guns still firing, soldiers still roaring. When silence finally returned to the battlefield, wreckage floated everywhere. Fires burned across shattered hulls. Bodies drifted in the cold, both human and Herracks. The Union fleet moved forward, careful, almost afraid to approach. What they found stunned them. Human ships were broken, but alive. Survivors stood at attention, battered but smiling through blood. Some sang as they repaired weapons. Others lifted fallen comrades with quiet respect. There was no fear in their eyes, only determination. The Union captains sent their thanks. Messages of gratitude and disbelief poured across the channels. One alien voice spoke for many. You stopped them. You truly stopped them. You are saviors, but the humans only shook their heads. A commander replied, his voice rough but steady. Don't thank us yet. This was only the first strike. The swarm will be back stronger and we'll be ready. Across the galaxy, those words spread like wildfire. Refugees in crowded stations whispered them with hope. Children on distant colonies repeated them in awe. For the first time since the war began, the galaxy believed the swarm could be defeated, and they all knew one truth. The Deathworlders had entered the fight. Victory came, but it was not without pain. The humans had won the first great clash against the Herrack swarm. They had pushed the monsters back, something no other species had managed before. The galaxy celebrated, hope returning like light breaking through a storm. Refugees cheered. Children whispered new stories of heroes from Earth. But behind the cheers, the humans buried their dead. Whole fleets had been lost. Families on Earth received messages of silence instead of voices. Mothers waited for sons who would never return. Lovers stared at empty chairs across the dinner table. The price of victory was written in blood, and the Deathworlders bore it without complaint. On a Union world, an alien officer walked through the recovery docks. Human soldiers were lined up in rows, their armor cracked, Their bodies burned. Yet even as they lay wounded, many still smiled. Some joked weakly with medics. Others asked when they would return to the front. The officer could not understand. He asked one young soldier, his arm in bandages, "Why do you fight so hard? These are not your people. These are not your worlds." The soldier looked at him with tired eyes and answered softly, "Because if we don't stand together, none of us stand at all." The officer carried those words with him for the rest of his life. The HFYs were relentless. They struck again and again, and the humans always answered. But every answer cost lives. There were battles where human fleets held the line for hours, only for none of them to return. There were stations saved, but only because human soldiers had fought until the last man. The galaxy watched in silence as humans gave everything. In the Great Council Hall, leaders argued about tactics and strategy. Some feared the humans were burning themselves out. Others feared something deeper, that humanity would win but lose its heart in the fire. But whenever doubt filled the air, reports of human courage silenced it. A recording spread through the Union, one that many could hardly believe. It showed a human captain, his ship surrounded, every escape cut off. His voice came through the comms. "We can't hold much longer. But don't worry. We'll buy you time. Tell them Earth stood." Moments later, his ship detonated, taking half the enemy fleet with it. For other species, sacrifice was a word used in speeches. For humans, it was something they lived, something they gave without hesitation. The galaxy began to change. Where once humans had been seen as dangerous, now they were seen as guardians. Refugees welcomed them with open arms. Children from alien worlds painted crude pictures of human soldiers, giving them wings like angels. Songs were sung in alien tongues about the Deathworlders who stood in the fire and did not fall. But for the humans themselves, there was no song, no celebration. There was only the next battle. In the barracks of a warship, a young soldier cleaned his rifle with shaking hands. He had lost friends on 3 worlds. His eyes were red, his body tired. Yet when the alarm sounded, he stood tall, ready to fight again. His commander placed a hand on his shoulder and said, "Rest when it's over." The soldier nodded. If it's ever over. The humans knew the war would not be won in a day or even a year. The HFYs were too many, too hungry, but still they fought. Not because they expected thanks, not because they wanted glory, but because they could not accept the thought of innocent lives being devoured while they still had breath in their lungs. One alien historian wrote, "They fight not for themselves, but for all of us." And that is why they are feared. And that is why they are loved. The galaxy now understood the truth of Deathworlders. They were not monsters. They were not reckless beasts. They were something far more dangerous. They were protectors who would not stop even if it cost them everything. And in the cold darkness of space, as human fleets once again prepared to face the swarm, one thought echoed across 1,000 worlds. If the galaxy was to survive, it would be because humans refused to fall. The war dragged on. For every victory, there was loss. For every saved world, another burned. The HFY swarm never slept, never slowed, never felt fear. Entire regions of space had become graveyards, and then came the greatest attack yet. Scouts brought the news the swarm was gathering. Not just a fleet, but their entire force pulling from every conquered system. They were preparing to strike at the very heart of the Union, the core worlds. Billions of civilians, unprotected, waited in terror. If the swarm broke through, the galaxy would fall. In the council hall, alien leaders argued in despair. Some cried for evacuation. Others whispered of surrender. None had a plan, none, except the humans. The human commanders sat quietly studying the maps. They traced the red tide of the swarm, measured its speed, and marked the stars in its path. And then they saw it, a chance. A trap that no other species would dare to set because it demanded too much, because it risked too much. But humans did not hesitate. The plan was simple, brutal, and terrifying. They would lure the swarm into a killing ground. Shattered moons would be turned into bombs. Dying suns would be forced into collapse. Entire fleets would sacrifice themselves to drag the swarm into the jaws of destruction. The galaxy gasped when the plan was revealed. An Avket admiral shouted, "You would destroy whole systems. You would kill yourselves along with them." The human general only stared back. Better to burn a few stars than let the whole galaxy die. And so the trap was set. When the swarm came, they found humans waiting. Not running, not begging, but waiting. Their fleet spread thin, their ships battered but unbroken. The Herax roared forward, a wave of living death, their numbers blotting out the stars. They believed they had already won. The humans struck. At first, the battle looked like madness. Human ships dived directly into the heart of the enemy, fighting at ranges so close their hulls burned from the heat of enemy fire. They fired missiles into the very mouths of Herax ships. They rammed again and again, tearing open monstrous vessels with their own broken steel. The swarm pressed harder, smelling victory. But with every push, the humans pulled them deeper, and then the trap closed. From hidden positions, vast detonations ripped across the battlefield. Moons shattered, releasing oceans of fire. Stars collapsed under human-engineered bombs, sending shockwaves that tore through the swarm's ranks. The void itself became a weapon. The Herax screamed. Whole sections of their fleet burned in seconds. Their formations broke. Panic, something they had never felt before, spread through their hive. Union fleets, inspired by the humans, charged from the flanks. For the first time, aliens fought with fury instead of fear. They roared into battle, side by side with the Deathworlders, striking enemies they once thought invincible. On the bridge of a human flagship, the commander gave the order with steady eyes. Detonate the last charge. The stars themselves obeyed. A dying sun exploded, its fury unleashed by human hands. Fire swallowed the battlefield. Swarm ships burned, their flesh and bone turned to ash. When the light faded, silence fell. The Herax were gone. Not all of them, not forever. But their greatest attack had failed. Their endless advance had been broken. The galaxy stared in shock. They had seen humans fight before, but never like this. To turn entire solar systems into weapons, to sacrifice fleets without hesitation, to fight with such ruthless brilliance. It was beyond imagination. On a Union world, refugees watched the broadcasts. Tears filled their eyes. A child whispered to his mother, "The monsters are gone." She held him close and nodded. The humans made them go. But victory had its price. Human fleets were shattered. Thousands of soldiers never returned. Survivors drifted in broken ships, their bodies scarred, their minds heavy with loss. Yet when asked if it had been worth it, their answer was always the same. Yes, because the galaxy still lives. The turning point had come. The Herax could bleed. They could be defeated. And the ones who had shown the galaxy the truth were the very people once feared as monsters themselves. The Deathworlders. Wreckage filled the void where the swarm had once roared. Shattered moons drifted like broken teeth. Stars still burned with the scars of forced collapse. Among the ruins, human ships floated, battered, burning, some silent forever. The Herax had been broken, their greatest strike turned to ash. The galaxy was safe, at least for now, but the price was carved into every survivor's heart. In the recovery stations, the wounded poured in. Humans limped through halls with torn armor and bloodied faces. Some carried their comrades, refusing to leave the fallen behind. Others lay still, eyes closed forever, their names spoken softly by those who lived. An alien medic, her 4 hands shaking, whispered as she treated a soldier, "Why do you keep smiling? You are half dead." The soldier winced in pain but grinned anyway. "Because we won. Because it means kids back home, your kids too, get to wake up tomorrow." The medic turned away, tears filling her eyes. News of the victory spread across the stars. Refugee camps erupted with emotion. Families hugged each other, weeping with relief. Children laughed for the first time in months. Priests of 1,000 faiths lifted their voices in praise. Everywhere one truth was spoken: the humans saved us. In the council hall, alien leaders gathered once more. This time there was no arguing. No one dared to question humanity's strength. Instead, they stood in awe. A feathered elder rose from his seat and said, "We once feared the Deathworlders. We called them reckless, dangerous, unstable. But it is they who faced the darkness when none of us could. It is they who paid the price." Others bowed their heads in agreement. For the first time in galactic history, every species honored Earth, but the humans themselves did not claim glory. On the flagship Unbroken Dawn, the commander addressed his surviving crew. His voice was quiet, his eyes shadowed with sorrow. "Do not think of this as victory," he said. "Think of it as survival bought by the brave who did not return. We live because they gave everything. Honor them by standing ready, for this war is not finished." The crew bowed their heads. The room filled with heavy silence. In distant colonies, alien children began to draw pictures of humans with wings, calling them angels of steel. Songs were sung of Deathworlders who stood in the fire and would not fall. But to the humans who walked among the ruins, they felt no wings, no song, only the weight of sacrifice. A young pilot sat beside the wreck of her fighter, staring at the stars. She whispered to herself, "We were not made to be heroes. We just couldn't let them win." The galaxy listened to such words and understood something deeper, that humanity's power did not come from weapons or ships, but from hearts that refused to surrender. Even enemies of the past took notice. Old rival empires who had once distrusted Earth now sent gifts and tributes not out of duty, but out of respect. They had seen the Deathworlders bleed for lives not their own. They had seen them burn entire systems not for conquest, but for the chance that others might live. The galaxy had changed, yet the humans remained the same. They rebuilt their fleets, trained new soldiers, and prepared for the next strike. For though the HFYs were wounded, they were not gone. Humanity knew better than to rest. Still in the quiet corners of the stars, aliens whispered prayers of thanks. Some prayed to their gods. Others simply looked to the sky. But all of them, no matter their language or belief, spoke one name with reverence. Humans, the Deathworlders. Those who were once feared as monsters were now honored as saviors. And as the galaxy watched the battered survivors of Earth rise once more, it understood a truth that would never be forgotten. The humans had saved them not because they were asked, but because they could not do anything else. And in that truth lay the greatest strength of all. The war with the HFYs did not end in a single battle. The galaxy knew that. Shadows still moved in distant corners, and the enemy would one day rise again. But something had changed forever. The name of Earth spread across every star system, not as a warning, but as a promise. Where once alien children had shivered at the thought of Deathworlders, now they whispered their names in awe. Humanity had shown the galaxy what it truly meant to fight, not for power, not for conquest, but for survival, for hope, and for one another. Across the ruins, memorials began to rise. On shattered moons and scarred planets, statues of human soldiers were built by alien hands. Some stood tall, weapons raised to the stars. Others knelt, carrying wounded friends. But all of them carried the same words carved beneath. They fought for us all. On one war-torn world, a young alien boy stood before such a statue, his mother beside him. His eyes were wide as he asked, "Mama, why did the humans save us?" The mother's voice trembled. "Because they know what pain feels like, child, and they would not let us suffer as they once did." The boy stared at the human's carved face, and in that silence, a seed of gratitude grew inside him that would never fade. On Earth, things were different. Families mourned. Empty chairs sat in countless homes. Graves stretched across green fields. The price of victory was heavier than the world could carry. Yet humanity endured, as it always had. They planted trees beside the graves. They told stories to the children of those who had fallen. And they rebuilt, not just their homes, but their hearts. A commander of the fleet stood before his people in the capital of Earth. His uniform was worn, his eyes heavy, but his voice carried like thunder. "We are not gods. We are not saviors. We are people, fragile, stubborn, and scarred. But when the galaxy called, we answered. We stood not because we were unafraid, but because we refused to bow. That is who we are. That is who we must remain." The crowd listened in silence, then rose in a wave of voices. They shouted not of victory, but of unity. For the first time, the galaxy was not divided by fear, but drawn together by respect. On distant worlds, alien poets began to write of Earth. They spoke of men and women who stood in the fire and did not falter. They called them guardians of the stars. They called them the unbroken, and some simply called them friends. Even the council, once proud and divided, now carried a new law. When the galaxy is in danger, we stand as one. At the heart of that law, carved in every record, was a single truth. It was humanity who had taught them this lesson. But humans themselves did not seek thrones or crowns. They did not rule. They did not demand tribute. Instead, they returned to the stars as watchmen. Their fleets became shields, not swords. They trained others not as soldiers for war, but as protectors of peace. Still whispers followed them. Some aliens spoke with reverence, some with fear, and some with both. "The Deathworlders are watching," they said. And to many those words were not a threat but a comfort. In time, generations passed. The war became history, then legend. Children of countless races grew up hearing the same bedtime tale of the day the galaxy was on the edge of death, and the Deathworlders came. Some children laughed and said it was just a story, but others would look to the stars, believing every word. On the anniversary of the great battle, the galaxy gathered. Not as nations, not as strangers, but as one. Ships from 1,000 worlds filled the void, forming a ring of light around a silent planet. At its center floated a single monument, a human soldier carved from stone holding both a rifle and a child. Aliens from across the stars stood together in silence. No speeches were made. No songs were sung. Only the quiet hum of ships filled the void as they remembered those